Don't harm me, spare me, and will bear you strong children." He lowered gun. Then everything changed. The night was dark, and the streets were empty. A cold wind blew through the narrow alleyways, carrying with it a sense of danger that made the hairs on her neck stand on end. She walked quickly, her heart pounding, but every step seemed heavier than the last. The small lanterns from the nearby houses flickered weakly, barely lighting the way. Shadows danced on the walls like silent watchers, reminding her that she was alone, completely alone. The world around her seemed silent, but her mind was roaring with fear. Every sound, a rustling bag, a distant bark, even the wind whistling through the cracks of old buildings, made her jump. She knew she was not safe. She had felt danger before, but never like this. This was different. This felt real. This was life or death. As she turned a corner, a figure appeared in the darkness. At first, she thought it was a trick of the shadows, but the figure stepped closer. He was tall, with a face she couldn't fully see, hidden under the dim light. In his hand, glinting coldly in the faint light, was a gun. Her body froze. Fear washed over her like a heavy wave, dragging her to the ground of her mind, leaving her powerless. Her legs felt weak, and her chest tightened. She wanted to scream, but her voice seemed trapped in her throat. Her mind raced. How did it come to this? How had she walked into this moment, alone and unprepared? She could feel the reality of the situation pressing down on her, suffocating and real. He stepped closer, and she noticed the way his eyes flicked toward her. There was something in them. Anger, yes, but also pain. A life lived with too many scars, and not enough love. She realized he was not just dangerous. He was a man broken by the world. A man who had seen more pain than a single heart should bear. Yet at that moment, none of that mattered to her. What mattered was survival. Every instinct in her screamed that she had to act fast or she would not survive the night. Her lips trembled as she spoke, barely above a whisper. "Please, don't harm me. I am not your enemy. Spare me, and I will bear strong children for this world." The words sounded strange even to her own ears. They were not just words of fear, but a desperate plea, almost like a prayer. Her heart pounded violently as she waited for a response. The silence that followed was deafening. She could hear her own breathing, sharp and uneven, and the sound of the wind outside seemed to echo her fear. For a moment, nothing moved. He did not fire. He did not speak. He just stood there, holding the gun, as if her words had entered his mind and paused time itself. Her thoughts raced. Was he thinking of killing her anyway? Was this the end? She wanted to run, but her body was frozen. Every muscle refused to obey. Her mind screamed at her to fight, to scream, to escape, but she could not move. And then she saw it, a flicker of something in his eyes. Surprise, maybe, confusion, and something softer, hidden beneath the anger and the hardness of his life. Something human. The words she had spoken, in all their fear and honesty, had reached a part of him that she had no right to reach. She realized in that moment that life was strange and unpredictable. Sometimes the simplest words could touch the deepest parts of a person, even someone who seemed completely lost. The gun lowered slightly. She noticed it, her heart leaping with a cautious hope. She could not believe it, yet she dared to breathe. She thought of everything she had ever wanted to say to the world, everything she had kept inside. Now, in the middle of this alley, surrounded by darkness and danger, she had spoken it. And for the first time that night, she felt a sliver of hope. But fear still lingered, heavy and persistent. She knew better than to assume safety. Not yet. Not until the danger had passed completely. Her mind replayed her life in flashes. She thought of her family, the small joys of her childhood, the struggles she had faced, the dreams she had quietly kept for herself. And in that flash, she realized how fragile life really was. 1 second, everything could be normal. The next, it could all vanish. The weight of that realization pressed down on her, stronger than fear itself. But it also gave her strength, a tiny spark that refused to be extinguished. She wanted to survive, not just for herself, but for all the dreams and hopes she had carried all her life. She wanted to prove that even in moments of absolute fear, courage could exist. The man watched her, and she could feel the shift. His breathing had changed. The rigid stance, the tense muscles, the coldness in his eyes, they softened just slightly. It was as if her words had reminded him of something he had forgotten, something he had buried deep inside. Humanity, empathy, the possibility of mercy. She did not know what it was exactly, but she saw it, and she realized that even in the darkest moments, change could happen in an instant. A single decision, a single act of mercy could alter the course of life. The air felt heavier now, but not just with fear. It carried tension, yes, but also the fragile possibility of something different. She knew that her life hung in the balance. One wrong move, one misstep could end everything. Yet in that dangerous, trembling moment, she felt alive in a way she had never known. Her senses were sharper, her thoughts faster, her heart beating with a rhythm that screamed life itself. She understood that survival was not just about escaping harm. It was about understanding life, understanding the people in it, and reaching the parts of them that even they might not know existed. Time seemed to stretch endlessly. The gun remained lowered, but not completely. She dared not move. Her eyes were fixed on him, her mind racing, trying to read every flicker of his expression. She knew that he could still decide to end everything in a single second. The fear was still there, but now it was accompanied by something else. Understanding. She had spoken truth, and truth had a strange power. It could reach even the hardest hearts, could pause violence for a moment, could make someone reconsider everything in an instant. Finally, the man shifted. The gun came down fully. She could hardly believe it. She felt the weight of relief crash over her like a wave. Tears sprang to her eyes, uncontrolled, rolling down her cheeks. She had survived. But more than that, she had reached him. Her words, her fear, her honesty had touched something in a man who had seemed unreachable. And in that moment, she realized that life was fragile, yes, but also filled with moments of unimaginable strength. Strength not of the body, but of the spirit. Strength that could survive fear, survive danger, survive even the darkest night. She collapsed to her knees, trembling, not from weakness, but from the sheer intensity of what had just happened. The world around her seemed different now. The shadows, the darkness, the cold wind, they still existed, but they felt less threatening. She had faced a moment of absolute terror and come through it, and in that survival she found something more, a deep, unshakable understanding that life could be changed in a single moment, by a single choice, by a single act of courage. The night stretched on, quiet now, though her heart still raced. She knew that danger might not be over, but she also knew something more important. She had survived not by running, not by hiding, but by speaking truth in the face of fear. And that truth, fragile and trembling, had the power to change everything. The man stood there, the gun lowered in his hand, but his mind was racing faster than ever. He had never felt words hit him like that before. For a long time, he had walked through life carrying anger, pain, and disappointment, like a heavy coat he could never take off. It had made him cold, distant, and sometimes cruel. People often feared him, but tonight, for the first time in many years, he felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel: doubt. Doubt about what he had become, and doubt about the choices that had led him to this dark alley at this late hour. Her words kept echoing in his mind: "Don't harm me, spare me, and I'll bear you strong children." At first he had not understood them fully. They sounded strange, almost foolish. But as he looked at her trembling figure, kneeling and praying silently with tears running down her cheeks, the weight of those words began to settle into his heart. There was truth in them. There was life, hope, and even a promise of strength, of continuation, of something greater than the pain he had been holding on to. For a moment he forgot the coldness of the gun in his hand, forgot the anger that had been burning inside him. He only saw her, fragile and terrified, yet unbroken in spirit. His breathing became uneven. Memories he had long buried began to surface. He remembered his own childhood, his mother's hands rough from hard work, yet always warm when she held him. He remembered the small joys he had once known, the laughter he had lost, and the moments of love that had seemed so fleeting. Life had not been kind to him, but she reminded him in a way no one ever had, that there was more to existence than pain and revenge. The thought made his throat tighten, and for the first time in a long while, tears threatened to form in his eyes. The gun in his hand felt heavier now, not because of its weight, but because of the burden of choice. He had held power over life and death many times before, but this time it felt different. The decision to pull the trigger to end her life in a moment of anger suddenly seemed meaningless, cruel, and entirely unnecessary. He realized that his own anger had been a shield, protecting him from feeling anything real, anything human. And now, that shield was cracking. Her words, so simple and honest, had started to break through the walls he had built around his heart. He looked at her closely. Her eyes, wide with fear but shining with determination, seemed to hold a strange kind of power. They were not begging for revenge, not demanding justice, not threatening him in any way. They were simply asking for life, for understanding, for mercy. And in that simple plea he saw something he had not expected: the reflection of the man he could have been if life had been different, if love had reached him when he needed it most. For a long moment he felt the weight of every harsh word he had spoken, every hand he had hurt, every chance he had missed to be better. The alley seemed quieter now, though the wind still whispered through the cracks in the walls. Time felt suspended, as if the universe itself had paused to watch what would happen next. He could feel the pulse of life around him, hers, strong and urgent, and his, slow and heavy with years of regret. The gun, once an extension of his anger, now felt like a choice he could no longer make lightly. He wondered how many times life had given him opportunities to change, to act differently, and how many times he had ignored them. And now, standing in front of this woman, he knew that ignoring this moment was no longer possible. His mind went back to the stories he had heard, the lessons he had learned too late. People said that a single act of kindness could change a life, that mercy was stronger than power, that love could be found in the most unexpected places. He had always thought those were just words, clichés meant to comfort the weak. But now, facing someone who could be taken away in a single second, he realized they were true. He could feel the truth of her words deep in his chest, a warmth spreading slowly where coldness had always lived. He lowered the gun further, until finally it pointed to the ground. She did not move at first, unsure if the danger had really passed. Her body shook, her hands trembling, as if the very act of breathing required effort. She dared to glance up, And when she saw the gun no longer aimed at her, she let out a shaky breath she had been holding for what felt like an eternity. Relief mixed with disbelief, and tears fell freely down her face. She had survived, but more importantly, she had reached him. She had reminded him of something essential, something he had forgotten about himself. The man still stood there, silent, staring at the ground. He was not free of fear or doubt, but the anger that had driven him to the edge of cruelty was gone, replaced by something more complicated: reflection, remorse, and even hope. He realized that sparing her life was not a sign of weakness, but an act of courage. It required more strength to resist the instinct to hurt than to give in to it. And for the first time in years, he felt a strange kind of pride, not in himself, but in the choice he had made, in the possibility of change, in the recognition that life could still hold unexpected surprises. The woman finally found her voice. Her words were soft, almost trembling, but filled with honesty. "Thank you," she whispered. I do not know why you stopped, but I am grateful. Truly." The man did not respond immediately. He could not. Words felt inadequate, clumsy, and unnecessary. Instead, he nodded slightly, a simple gesture that carried more meaning than anything he could have spoken. In that nod was acknowledgement, understanding, and perhaps even an unspoken apology. For a moment, they simply stood there, facing each other in the quiet alley, the night pressing in from all sides. The danger had not completely vanished, but the fear of immediate death had lifted. She could feel it in her bones, in her racing heart, that something significant had happened, not just in her life, but in his. She had touched a part of him that he had hidden even from himself, and that realization gave her a new kind of strength. As the wind continued to whisper, he slowly stepped back. The gun was lowered, and for the first time he felt its weight as a burden he no longer needed to carry. His life had been filled with pain, anger, and fear, but in this moment, a small spark of something different glowed within him. It was fragile, yes, but it was real. And as he looked at the woman one last time before turning to leave, he felt a sense of possibility he had long forgotten, the chance to be better, to change, to heal.
The woman watched him go, her body still trembling, but her mind clearer than it had been in years.
She had survived, yes, but more than that, she had witnessed a transformation, a glimpse of humanity returning to someone who had lost it for so long. Her heart was still racing, her soul still shaken, but she understood something essential. Fear could be faced, mercy could be given, and even the darkest hearts could be touched by the light of honesty and courage. She sat down on the cold ground, letting the tears fall freely, not just from fear, but from relief, gratitude, and awe at what had just happened. She thought about life, about the strange ways people were connected, and about how one moment, one single moment, could change everything. The night was still dark, but for the first time it felt less threatening. The alley, once a place of terror, now held a quiet promise of hope. And in that quiet, fragile space, she realized that survival was more than just living through danger. It was about touching hearts, inspiring change, and witnessing the human capacity for growth, even in the most unlikely circumstances. By the time she stood to leave, the night had grown colder, but she felt warmer inside. The memory of the man, the gun, and the moment he chose, mercy would stay with her forever. It was a story she would carry not as a tale of fear, but as a lesson in courage, humanity, and the incredible power of words. And as she walked away, her steps lighter than they had been in hours, she understood one truth clearly. Sometimes, The smallest acts, the quietest words, and the simplest gestures could change everything. Even a heart hardened by pain and anger. The alley that had seemed quiet and almost safe only moments ago suddenly felt different. The wind that whispered softly now carried a sharper chill, and the shadows that had been still began to shift and move in strange, unsettling ways. The woman, though grateful and relieved after what had just happened, felt a new tension rise in her chest. She had survived the immediate danger, yes, but instinct whispered that the world was far from safe. Danger, she realized, could take forms she had not yet imagined. The man who had lowered the gun was gone from sight, but she could still feel his presence lingering in her mind. His words had been few, almost non-existent, yet the weight of his silence pressed on her in a strange way. She had witnessed a change in him, a crack in the wall he had built around his heart, and part of her wanted to believe that all would be well. But experience and the quiet terror of the night reminded her that life often had unexpected turns. One moment of mercy could easily be followed by another twist of fate, one she could not control. As she took cautious steps forward, the sound of movement came from deeper in the alley. At first, she thought it might be the wind again, or perhaps a stray animal scavenging in the dark. But the sound grew louder, closer, and her heart began to pound violently. Her senses, sharpened by fear, picked up the faintest details: a shadow darting behind a corner, the sound of hurried footsteps on cracked stones, a soft but determined whistle. She froze, realizing that the night had more dangers yet to reveal. A figure emerged suddenly from the shadows, taller and faster than she expected. She did not recognize this person, and instinct screamed that this was no friend. Panic surged through her, but it was mixed with a strange clarity. She had survived one encounter, and the lessons of that moment taught her that careful observation and quick thinking could be her allies. She noticed every detail: the way the figure moved, the light reflecting off a small metallic object in their hand, the way they seemed aware of her presence. Every step they took seemed deliberate, purposeful, and full of intent. Her mind raced. Was this a new threat? Could it be someone related to the man who had just spared her life? She did not know, and the uncertainty was almost worse than knowing. Yet she knew that running blindly could be just as dangerous. She took a deep, steadying breath, trying to control the trembling in her hands. Survival, she reminded herself, was not just about speed or strength. It was about awareness, understanding, and the ability to make decisions under pressure. The figure stopped a short distance away, and the faint moonlight revealed enough for her to see a face that was unfamiliar, yet determined. There was no immediate hostility, but the tension in the air was undeniable. She realized quickly that this person was not a mindless attacker, but someone with purpose. Her mind tried to imagine their motives: robbery, revenge, a misunderstanding. The uncertainty was suffocating, and yet, strangely, it also sharpened her senses even more. Fear, she realized, could be a tool if channeled correctly. Before she could react further, a sudden shout came from behind her. It was sharp, urgent, and full of warning. She spun around, heart leaping, and saw another figure emerging from the darkness. The world seemed to tilt, and chaos threatened to engulf the quiet alley she had just thought was under her control. The two new figures seemed to approach from different directions, and instinctively, she realized that the situation was no longer simple. The mercy she had just experienced might have bought her a moment of safety, but it had also shifted the balance of events in ways she could not yet understand. Her thoughts flashed to the man who had spared her. Was he aware of this new danger? Had his choice inadvertently put her at risk once again? The guilt of surviving while danger continued to grow pressed on her, but she knew she could not dwell on it. Action was required. She had to find a way to navigate this new threat, to survive, and to protect herself with the intelligence and courage she had only recently discovered within herself. The first figure approached closer, their eyes narrowing as if assessing her every movement. She noticed the subtle tension in their shoulders, the deliberate way they held their hands, ready for whatever might happen. Her body tensed in response, every nerve alert, every muscle prepared for reaction. This was no ordinary encounter. This was a test of endurance, wit, and courage. She realized that she could not rely on luck alone. Luck had brought her this far, yes, but the lessons of survival required skill, not chance. Suddenly the figure spoke, their voice calm but carrying authority. "You shouldn't be here," they said. The words were simple, but the meaning was heavy. She understood that their presence was intentional, purposeful, and that she had stepped into something far larger than herself. Every instinct screamed that retreat might be wise, yet she also knew that fleeing blindly could be fatal. She had to think quickly, to analyze the situation, to find a path that allowed her to survive without provoking further danger. Her mind raced through possibilities. Could she talk her way out? Could she find a route to escape unnoticed? Could she rely on the shadows and the silence to give her cover? Every option seemed fraught with risk, yet the knowledge that her life depended on these choices sharpened her focus. She could feel the fear bubbling beneath the surface, but it was no longer paralyzing. It was motivating, driving her to think with precision, to act with purpose. The second figure approached from the opposite direction, and the two seemed almost unaware of each other at first. Their movements suggested coordination, as if they were acting with a plan, and she understood that the situation was now far more complex than a single confrontation. The alley, once a place of fear and suspense, had transformed into a stage for a sudden and unpredictable twist of fate. She had survived one act of mercy, but now survival demanded more than words and courage. It demanded strategy, attention, and a careful understanding of human behavior. Her mind flicked to memories of past lessons, moments when she had observed people, situations, and threats, and learned to adapt quickly. She realized that these lessons were now the difference between life and death. The shadows, the shifting light, the subtle sounds of movement, all became tools she could use. Fear, once a paralyzing force, had become her ally, sharpening her awareness, heightening her senses, and making her acutely aware of every detail in the alley. As the two figures drew closer, she noticed a subtle hesitation in their steps. They were confident, yes, but they were not fully in control. The same tension she had felt earlier was mirrored in them, a recognition that the world, unpredictable and chaotic, could turn at any second. She realized that this uncertainty was her advantage. While fear could paralyze, it could also reveal opportunity. And if she could act with clarity, if she could use her awareness wisely, she might navigate this sudden twist in a way that allowed her to survive and even gain the upper hand. The first figure spoke again, their voice carrying a strange mixture of curiosity and warning. "Why are you here?" they asked. The question seemed simple, but it carried weight. Every word mattered now. Her answer, calm yet honest, could shape what happened next. She realized that honesty, courage, and quick thinking could still influence outcomes, even in a situation that seemed increasingly out of control. She took a deep breath, gathering herself, and prepared to respond. Her survival depended not only on reacting to danger, but also on understanding it, shaping it, and confronting it with both wisdom and courage. The alley, once a place of immediate threat, had become a crucible, testing not only her ability to endure fear, but also her capacity to adapt, understand, and act with precision in the face of unexpected twists. As she spoke, the figures paused, listening carefully. Her words were not just a plea. They were a reflection of the strength she had discovered within herself. Every syllable carried honesty, courage, and an acknowledgement of the reality of the situation. For the first time, she realized that survival was about more than escaping danger. It was about engaging with it, understanding it, and finding a way to transform fear into clarity, chaos into opportunity, and uncertainty into control. The night stretched on, tense and heavy with anticipation. Shadows shifted, the wind whispered, and every sound seemed amplified in the silence. But she was no longer paralyzed by fear. She was alert, aware, and prepared. The sudden twist in her night had revealed a truth she had not fully understood before. Danger could come at any moment, and survival required more than luck. It required intelligence, courage, and a willingness to face the unknown with a steady heart and a clear mind. And in that moment, as the figures continued their cautious approach, she realized something even more important. No matter what happened next, she had already changed. The mercy she had inspired, the courage she had discovered, and the awareness she had honed would guide her through whatever challenges lay ahead. The alley, dark and uncertain, had become a place of learning, growth, and Reveille the alley was quiet once again. But the silence was heavy, pressing down on her chest like a weight she could not shake. The events of the night had left her shaken, her mind racing, her heart refusing to slow down. She had survived one moment of danger, faced sudden twists she could never have predicted, and somehow remained standing. But now, as she took cautious steps toward the faint lights of the city beyond the alley, she realized that the danger had not truly ended. It had only changed. Her mind replayed everything that had happened. The man with the gun, the unexpected mercy he had shown, the sudden appearance of the two other figures. It was all a blur of fear, relief, and confusion. But as she tried to make sense of it, she realized that there were consequences she could not ignore. Life, she knew, rarely allowed one to walk away unscathed. Every choice, every act, even mercy, carried repercussions. And now she was beginning to understand the weight of those consequences. The first ripple of consequences hit when she returned to the street. People she passed glanced at her with curiosity, some with suspicion. The night had changed her, even if no one else could see it yet. Her eyes were sharper, her movements cautious, and her entire presence carried the tension of someone who had faced death and lived. She felt different, almost as if the world itself had shifted beneath her feet. She had survived, but she had also been marked by the night, by the choices made and avoided, by the mercy she had received and the danger that had surrounded her. Her thoughts went back to the man who had lowered the gun. What would happen to him now? She had seen a crack in his armor, a glimpse of humanity that had lain hidden for so long. But what about the rest of his life? Would he continue on the path that had brought him here, or would the simple act of mercy change something within him? The questions gnawed at her. Life, she realized, was a series of choices, each one carrying consequences that could ripple far beyond a single night. And sometimes, the consequences of mercy could be as complicated as the consequences of anger. As she walked, she began to notice the subtle ways the night had changed her perception. Every shadow seemed more alive, every sound more distinct. The footsteps of strangers echoed differently now, and the flickering streetlights seemed to hold messages she could barely understand. She had learned, painfully, that safety was fragile, that trust was delicate, and that even the smallest choices could have enormous effects. She felt the weight of this understanding in her chest, heavy but instructive. Survival was not just about getting through danger, it was about understanding it, anticipating it, and learning from it. The sudden twists of the night returned to her mind. The unexpected appearance of the two other figures had shown her that life could be unpredictable in ways that no one could fully prepare for. She had learned to rely on her instincts, her observations, and her courage, and yet, even as she reflected on her own growth, she realized that the consequences of that night extended far beyond her own experience. The man with the gun, the strangers in the alley, and the choices each of them had made would continue to shape lives in ways she could not yet see. Her journey through the streets was slow and deliberate. She paused often, listening to the night around her, feeling the pulse of the city, and trying to make sense of the lessons she had learned. She understood now that survival was not simply about escaping danger. It was about carrying the knowledge gained through experience, understanding the fragility of life, and recognizing the responsibility that came with living. Each step she took felt heavy with meaning, each breath a reminder that life was precious and often unpredictable. The emotional toll of the night began to settle in. She realized that fear and relief could coexist in the same heartbeat, that mercy could bring both hope and complication, and that life often demanded resilience far beyond what one imagined. She thought of her own family, her friends, the people she cared about, and the world she had temporarily escaped. Each thought carried both gratitude and sorrow, the knowledge that her survival had not erased the danger but had only postponed it, and the realization that life's lessons often came with pain. As she walked past familiar streets and dimly lit shops, she noticed how the night had changed the way she saw people. Strangers who passed her seemed to carry stories she could not know, and every glance held potential judgment or kindness. She realized that life was full of hidden narratives, and her own experience was only one small thread in a vast tapestry of human struggle. The events of the night had given her insight into human nature, into fear, anger, mercy, and resilience, and she understood that these lessons would remain with her forever. Yet even as she reflected, a sense of vulnerability remained. The alley, the shadows, and the unpredictability of the world reminded her that safety was temporary, that choices mattered, and that even acts of courage could have unforeseen consequences. She felt a mix of empowerment and caution, empowered because she had faced danger and lived, and cautious because she knew that life could challenge her again in ways she could not yet imagine. The balance between these emotions was delicate, but it was necessary for survival. Her thoughts wandered to the man with the gun once more. She had seen a human being capable of change, capable of mercy, and capable of regret. But she had also seen the complexity of consequences, how a single act of kindness could ripple through lives in ways both positive and challenging. She wondered if he would face his own struggles, if he would grapple with guilt, or if he would continue on a path of isolation. The night had shown her that human lives were interconnected, and that choices, even small ones, could shape destinies in ways that were often unpredictable. As dawn approached, the city began to stir. The first light of morning cast long shadows across the streets, revealing details that had been hidden in the night. She walked slowly, absorbing the quiet beauty of the early day, and felt a renewed sense of purpose. The events of the night had changed her, yes, but they had also strengthened her. She knew that life would continue to present challenges, dangers, and unexpected moments, but she felt more prepared to face them. Survival, she realized, was about more than escaping immediate threats. It was about carrying lessons forward, embracing resilience, and recognizing the power of courage and mercy. By the time she reached the edge of the city, she felt both exhausted and awakened. The emotional weight of the night pressed heavily on her, yet she also felt a strange clarity. She had survived not by chance, but by awareness, courage, and an understanding of human nature. She had witnessed mercy in its rawest form, experienced fear in its most intense, and navigated challenges that demanded both instinct and intelligence. The consequences of the night were far-reaching, touching not only her own life but potentially the lives of others she had encountered. She paused for a moment, looking back toward the alley that had changed everything. The shadows were now empty, silent, but she could still feel the echoes of the night, the tension, the fear, the mercy, and the sudden twists. She realized that the world was full of moments like this, moments that tested courage, morality, and resilience. Life was unpredictable, yes, but it was also filled with opportunities for growth, understanding, and connection. The night had taught her that consequences, while often challenging, were also a chance to learn, reflect, and emerge stronger. As she continued her journey, she carried with her a new awareness of life's fragility and the responsibility that came with surviving. The events of the night had left their mark, a mixture of fear, insight, and emotional growth. She understood that danger and mercy were intertwined, that human actions had far-reaching consequences, and that survival required both courage and wisdom. Every step she took was a testament to the resilience she had discovered within herself, and every breath was a reminder that life, though fragile, was precious and full of lessons yet to be learned. The city slowly came to life around her. Vendors began opening shops, birds sang from rooftops, and the morning light revealed a world that seemed ordinary yet extraordinary in its capacity for change. She knew that her life would never be the same. The events of the night had shown her both the darkness and the light in people, the complexity of human choices, and the profound impact of a single act, whether of anger or mercy. And as she stepped forward into the day, she carried the quiet strength of someone who had faced fear, witnessed change, and survived with both insight and courage. The sun had risen fully, casting warm light over the streets that had been dark and threatening only hours ago. She walked slowly, letting the brightness wash over her, though the memories of the night still clung to her like shadows she could not shake. The alley, the man with the gun, the sudden twists, and the unexpected mercy, all of it felt surreal now, like a dream she had lived through. But it was real. Every heartbeat, every shiver, every moment of fear had been real, and yet she had survived. She had lived through the night that could have ended her life, and in that survival she had discovered a strength she had never known. Her thoughts went back to the man who had lowered the gun. She had not seen him again, and she did not know what had become of him. She wondered if he had returned to his old ways, or if the mercy he had shown her had begun to change him in ways he could not yet understand. The thought of him brought a strange mix of emotions: fear, curiosity, and even hope. She realized that people could change, that one moment could ripple through a life and alter its course. She had been witness to such a moment, and that awareness made her heart ache with both sorrow and optimism. As she continued through the streets, she noticed the small details of life around her. Shopkeepers were arranging their goods, children ran laughing through the alleys, and birds sang on the rooftops. The world seemed ordinary, yet she could not help but see it differently. Everything was heightened now. Every sound, every movement, every glance of a passer-by carried meaning. She had learned that life was fragile, that danger could appear without warning, and that survival depended on awareness, courage, and the ability to make the right choices in the face of uncertainty. Her mind wandered to the lessons she had learned. Mercy, she realized, was more powerful than anger or violence. One simple act of kindness had changed the course of her night, and perhaps the course of another person's life as well. She thought about the words she had spoken, words that had seemed strange at the time, words born of fear and desperation. Yet those words had reached a heart that she had no right to reach, and in doing so, had altered the path of both of their lives. She realized that courage was not always about physical strength or action. Sometimes it was about honesty, vulnerability, and the willingness to speak truth, even when the stakes were high. As the city came fully to life, she felt a sense of clarity she had never experienced before. The night's events had left scars, yes, but they had also left insight. She knew that life would continue to challenge her, that danger could appear again in unexpected forms, and that survival required both wisdom and courage. But she also knew that she had grown. She had faced fear head on, had witnessed the humanity in someone she had thought was lost to anger, and had discovered a resilience within herself that could not be taken away. The consequences of the night were not limited to her own growth. She thought about the ripple effects, the man, the strangers in the alley, and even those who might never know her story but would be touched indirectly by it. She realized that life was interconnected in ways she could not always see. Every act, whether of kindness, violence, or courage, could spread far beyond the moment, shaping lives in ways both visible and hidden. This understanding gave her a new perspective on human nature and the power of choices. She paused at a small park, the first place where she could sit and let the weight of the night settle. She rested on a bench, her hands folded in her lap, and let herself think. The fear that had gripped her so tightly was now tempered by understanding and reflection. She realized that survival was not just about escaping physical danger. It was about growing stronger, wiser, and more aware because of it. Life, she understood, was fragile, but it was also filled with opportunities for courage, compassion, and change. Her thoughts returned once more to the man with the gun. She did not know his fate, but she hoped that her words and her survival had left an impression on him. Perhaps he would remember that night not as one where he had the power to destroy, but as one where he had the power to save, and that memory could guide him toward a better path. She realized that forgiveness, mercy, and compassion were not just gifts for the person receiving them, but for those giving them as well. Her own survival had been shaped by his choice to act with humanity, and that realization filled her with a quiet gratitude. As the morning continued, she walked through the streets with a renewed sense of purpose. She understood that life would always carry challenges, uncertainties, and moments of fear, but she also knew that she had the strength to face them. Every step she took was a reminder of her resilience, and every breath was a testament to the courage she had discovered within herself. She felt lighter, not because the night's events had ended, but because she had emerged from them stronger, wiser, and more aware of the delicate balance between fear and courage, danger and mercy. The city around her was alive with movement and sound, yet she could see it clearly now, with the perspective she had gained through experience. People went about their lives, unaware of the struggles she had faced, yet she understood that everyone carried hidden stories, challenges, and moments of bravery that shaped the world in ways others might never notice. She felt connected to this truth, and it gave her both humility and strength. Life was not only about surviving for oneself, but about witnessing and appreciating the complexity of human existence. Her thoughts drifted to the concept of legacy, not fame or wealth, but the marks people leave through their choices, their courage, and their compassion. She realized that her survival, the mercy she had received, and the lessons she had learned were part of her own legacy. They would shape her actions, her words, and her understanding for years to come. And perhaps, in ways she could not yet see, they might influence others as well. The events of one night, small and fragile as they seemed, could echo far into the future. She walked toward her home, the streets becoming more familiar with every step. The warmth of the morning sun reminded her that even after darkness, life continued. She thought of her family, her friends, and the small joys of daily life that she often took for granted. She understood now that every moment was precious, that fear and danger were part of the human experience, and that courage and mercy were the forces that could guide one through the darkest times. The night had tested her, and she had survived, not by chance, but by insight, awareness, and the simple yet profound power of human connection. Finally, as she entered her home, she felt a sense of closure mixed with anticipation. The night had changed everything, yet it had also prepared her for the future. She had learned that survival was about more than escaping harm. It was about understanding life, human nature, and the potential for change in every moment. She had seen mercy, faced fear, and discovered resilience within herself. And as she settled into the quiet comfort of her home, she knew that she carried not just memories of danger, but lessons that would guide her for the rest of her life. Sitting by the window, she looked out at the city, bathed in morning light. The shadows of the night were gone, but their lessons remained. She thought of the man, the strangers, and the twists that had shaped her journey. She understood that life was unpredictable, but it was also full of opportunity to act with courage, to show mercy, and to grow stronger through every challenge. The night had been terrifying, yes, but it had also been transformative. She had survived, learned, and emerged with a clarity she could never have gained otherwise. Her final thought was one of hope. She knew that life would continue to bring challenges, but she also knew that she had the strength, courage, and insight to face them. She had experienced fear, mercy, and change, and in that experience, she had discovered the true meaning of resilience. Life was fragile, unpredictable, and sometimes frightening, but it was also beautiful, full of lessons, and capable of inspiring the strongest courage. And as she closed her eyes, feeling the warmth of the sun and the quiet peace of home, she understood that she had survived not just physically, but as a person, stronger, wiser, and ready to face whatever life had yet to offer.